My name is Julia Foster. I'm 27, and I thought I knew exactly where my life was headed. I had a stable job in marketing, a cozy apartment in the city I shared with my boyfriend, Charles Jones, and a sense of routine that was comforting, maybe too comforting. Charles was dependable, funny, and genuinely kind most days. We split the rent, the utilities, the groceries, 50-50. Life was predictable, and I liked it that way. That Thursday night, we went out to a trendy downtown restaurant with his 3 closest friends. It was supposed to be casual, dinner, drinks, laughs, nothing complicated. I even let myself feel normal until I didn't. The restaurant was buzzing, the kind of place where every clink of a glass echoed in the crowded room. I excused myself to the bathroom after we ordered, needing a brief escape from the noise. The hallway was narrow, and as I walked back toward the table, I froze. I heard my name. Julia's sweet and all, Charles's voice carried clearly down the corridor. But let's be real, she's just a placeholder until someone better comes along. I stopped in my tracks. My pulse hit my throat. My stomach twisted. A placeholder? I replayed the words in my head, each syllable sharper than the last. 2 years. 2 years of shared life, meals, Netflix nights, late night talks, plans whispered in the dark. All of it. A convenience? I could hear the laughter of the girls at the table. Ashley's high-pitched giggle, Brittany's scoff. "Girl, you're terrible," someone said. I didn't need to hear more to know the betrayal was real. I leaned against the wall, fighting the urge to scream, to storm back, to confront him. I pictured Charles's face, smiling, oblivious, holding my hand just 5 minutes ago while planning my replacement in his mind. I thought of our apartment, our shared furniture, the life I had built alongside him. My chest tightened. A deep breath. I had to go back. I had to face him, not with tears, not with anger, but with clarity. Returning to the table, I sat down, forced a polite smile, and let the evening continue as if nothing had happened. The tension between us was invisible to everyone but me, but I felt it like a live wire, pulsing under my skin. Food arrived. I ate mechanically, nodded at jokes, smiled at the right moments. All the while, the words replayed relentlessly in my mind. Placeholder. Until someone better comes along. When the check came, I pulled out my card. "Just my portion, please," I told the waiter, pointing to my entree and drink. Charles blinked. "Babe, we usually split it." "Not tonight," I said, my voice steady, calm but cold. I met his eyes and said what I needed to. "Good luck finding someone better, Charles." The table went silent. My hands, still shaking, laid exact cash for my meal, plus tip on the table. I didn't wait for a response. I walked out. Outside, the cold air hit me like reality itself. I fumbled for my phone, expecting a flood of frantic texts, calls, perhaps even apologies. There were dozens, but I ignored them all. I didn't want to respond. Not yet. Maybe never. Instead, I drove to my friend Eric's apartment, packed an overnight bag, and collapsed on his couch. Morning came with quiet determination. I called the utility companies. Every service, the gas, the electricity, internet, transferred immediately into Charles' name. No warnings, no discussion. The finality felt intoxicating. I stopped subsidizing a relationship that had never been mutual in intent. Charles's calls went unanswered. His texts, ignored. I could almost hear the disbelief in his words, the confusion creeping through every message. The apartment would now be his problem entirely, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty. I sat on my bed later that morning, wrapped in a blanket, staring out at the city skyline, and let the emotions wash over me. Betrayal, sadness, anger, relief, sometimes all at once. 2 years of emotional labor, of shared responsibilities, of daily life, and all he saw was a financial placeholder. Flashbacks hit me in sharp, unrelenting waves. The first dinner we shared, his hand brushing mine under the table, laughing at my corny jokes. The late-night movie marathons where he'd fall asleep on my shoulder. The small things, my coffee mug, my playlist, my favorite blanket, all of it reduced to a transaction in his mind. I thought about Madison, his ex-girlfriend, and her influence on him, whether direct or indirect. The toxic whispers of gold digger mentality and casual comments about comfort had always been in the background, but I'd brushed them off. I hadn't known I was part of that narrative. Now I did. By mid-morning, I had packed a few essentials and left my side of the apartment bare. My gaming setup, TV, and most of the kitchenware, all mine, all leaving with me. I moved methodically, each item a symbolic reclaiming of my life, a quiet rebellion against being used. When Charles finally arrived, he found me calm, deliberate, unwavering. "Julia, this isn't necessary," he stammered. "It's over, Charles," I said. "I can't subsidize someone who doesn't see me as a partner, just a convenience. This ends now." He opened his mouth, searching for words, any excuse, any plea. I didn't give him the chance. Silence was my answer, my statement. The apartment was mine no longer to share with someone who viewed me as a temporary solution to his financial comfort. I left him with the empty rooms, the faint smell of what once was, and a realization that my life, my contributions, my care had been transactional in his mind all along. I walked away, free from the weight of his deception. For the first time in months, or maybe years, I felt the thrill of control, the power of boundaries, the sweetness of independence. The betrayal had stung, yes, but in its aftermath, clarity emerged. I was no longer just a placeholder. I was Julia Foster, fully aware, fully capable, and fully determined to never again allow someone to treat me as less than I am. And as the city bustled outside, indifferent to my personal upheaval, I smiled faintly. This was the beginning, not the end. I woke the next morning in the quiet of my own apartment, the sunlight filtering through the blinds. For the first time in months, I didn't have to worry about someone else's financial irresponsibility. I sipped my coffee slowly, savoring the freedom, letting the tension of the previous night drain from my shoulders. By 8 a.m., I was on the phone with the utility companies. My voice was calm, measured. Every service, gas, electric, internet, was officially in Charles's name. No arguments, no delay. I hung up and felt a lightness in my chest I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't angry anymore. I was resolute. It didn't take long for the first flurry of messages. Charles called. Texts poured in. I ignored them all. I didn't want to argue. There was nothing to negotiate. He was now entirely responsible for the life we had shared, and suddenly the comfort of cohabitation was gone. It was astonishing how quickly the people around him became involved. That afternoon, Madison's mother, Patricia, called my phone. I hadn't spoken to her in years, but her voice carried the tone of righteous indignation. "Julia Foster, how dare you abandon Charles like this? You can't just leave him with nothing. This is cruel." I let out a slow breath, steadying myself. "Patricia, Charles is capable of handling his bills. I didn't abandon him. I simply stopped subsidizing a relationship that wasn't mutual. That's not cruelty. That's boundaries." She gasped into the phone. "Boundaries? Your boundaries are destroying my daughter's life. You're supposed to love him unconditionally." I resisted the urge to laugh. The sheer absurdity of the statement was staggering. "Love is not financial slavery, Patricia. I wasn't his ATM. He has 2 years' worth of evidence showing exactly what I mean. You can argue with him if you like, but don't drag me into a morality play I didn't agree to." The call ended with a tirade of creative insults, Patricia's voice dripping with judgment. I hung up and let the silence wrap around me. My apartment felt lighter, brighter. This was my life, my choices, my consequences. By the evening, the social escalation had reached a new level. Madison called, leaving voicemails alternating between sobbing pleas and veiled threats. She had enlisted her friends Ashley, Kayla, and Brittany as mediators and cheerleaders, creating a chorus of manipulation. I knew from experience how they operated: guilt, gaslighting, emotional dramatics. I didn't answer. Instead, I packed up more of my things: my gaming setup, the kitchen appliances I'd bought, my clothes, all leaving with me. Each item was a silent declaration. I was taking control. Every object removed from the apartment was a symbol of my independence and a shield against being used. When Charles finally arrived, I was calm, methodical. He froze in the doorway, taking in the emptiness. "Julia, you can't just do this," he said, his voice trembling. "I already did," I replied evenly. "I'm done subsidizing a relationship that was never reciprocal. Everything we shared financially is now your responsibility. I'll pay my half through the lease, but that's it. He opened his mouth to argue, to plead, but I didn't give him the chance. The apartment had become a gallery of absence, each empty shelf a reminder that my patience and my generosity had limits. The following days were a whirlwind. Madison's parents called repeatedly, demanding explanations and threatening legal action. Charles tried every line: shock, disbelief, pleading. But I remained unwavering. I didn't need to justify myself beyond the facts. She had admitted I was a placeholder. She had admitted she was using him for financial convenience. My role was simple: remove myself from the equation. I remember watching Charles struggle to pay the first bills alone. Electricity due, gas due, internet transfer fees. He had always relied on me to handle half, and suddenly it was all his. I won't lie. It was satisfying to witness him confront the reality of his own negligence. Not vindictive, just necessary. Social media entered the mix. Madison took to Instagram and Facebook, painting herself as the victim of financial abuse. She crafted posts about betrayal, hardship, and abandonment. I watched with a mix of disbelief and quiet amusement. Her narrative was carefully curated, but the truth had its own stubborn way of surfacing. Screenshots, texts, and the witness of friends made it impossible for her to fabricate fully. Her friends, predictably, sided with her initially. "Julia, you can't just do this," Ashley messaged. "You're being so cruel. Think about Madison." I typed one reply. "Interesting. Using me for bills while planning my replacement isn't considered financial manipulation?" Then I sent screenshots showing her authorized user status for 8 months. That message disappeared within the hour. I watched from the quiet of my apartment as the chaos unfolded. Friends, family, social media, an entire world reacting to my decision. But I stayed rooted, calm, unshaken. The storm of outrage didn't touch me because I knew my truth. By Friday, Madison showed up in person, accompanied by Ashley and Qley. They were ready for confrontation. She stumbled through emotional appeals, sobbing, manipulating, begging. "Julia, please, we need to talk. I didn't mean it." I stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching her unravel. "You did mean it, Madison. Every word. You planned my replacement while I was your partner. That's not a mistake. That's calculation." Her friends tried to intercede. "Ashley, Qley, she's upset. Julia, be reasonable." I shook my head slowly. I am being reasonable. I'm not subsidizing someone who misrepresents their intentions. The apartment is yours now. Handle it. Madison wailed louder, dramatic and loud, painting the scene with tears and indignation. I let her, quietly taking mental notes of every manipulation attempt. Her panic, her social theatrics, only confirmed the truth I already knew. Her entitlement had no boundaries. By the end of the day, she left, frustrated and powerless, against a woman who had finally claimed her autonomy. The apartment was hers alone. The bills, her responsibility. I had given her a mirror, and she didn't like what she saw. Sitting on my couch that night, I reflected on the events. I didn't feel guilty. I felt clarity, empowerment, and, dare I admit, relief. The years I spent giving, caring, and compromising had been for someone who didn't value me as a person. That ended. For the first time, I allowed myself to imagine a future fully independent, where my love and loyalty would no longer be transactional. The storm outside, Charles's panic, Madison's social campaign, raged, but inside, I had calm. I had justice. I had freedom. By Monday morning, the digital storm had begun. Madison had taken to Instagram, Facebook, and every platform she could think of, framing herself as the victim of financial abuse and abandonment. Her captions were carefully crafted, dramatic, heart-wrenching, designed to provoke outrage. I watched silently, scrolling through the posts with a sense of detachment. There was no panic in me, only a quiet observation. The truth was on my side. She had been the one using me, using Charles, and now she wanted the world to believe the opposite. Comments poured in. Friends, acquaintances, strangers offering advice, judgment, and support. "Julia, how could you?" one wrote. "Charles must be devastated." Another chimed in. "Financial abuse is real. She's lucky to escape." I let them talk. There was no need to defend myself publicly. My evidence spoke louder than any viral post. Screenshots showing her authorized user status on utilities, texts acknowledging our shared expenses, even friends who had witnessed her candid admission months ago, all of it formed a quiet fortress around the truth. Meanwhile, Madison's parents began their own campaign. Patricia called at 9 a.m., followed by Robert 30 minutes later. Their voices were filled with urgency and anger. "Julia, you can't just do this to our daughter. It's cruel and unprecedented," Patricia screeched over the phone. I leaned back in my chair, hands folded. "Patricia, I didn't create this situation. Your daughter did. She admitted to using Charles for financial convenience. I simply stopped being part of that arrangement." Patricia gasped, as if she'd never heard the words before. But, you can't just leave him without support." "Support?" I asked softly, almost pitying. "He's perfectly capable of paying his own bills. That's not neglect, it's accountability." The calls ended, but the pressure didn't. Madison's friends, Ashley, Kayla, Brittany, tried mediation through texts and calls, but I ignored the pleas. I wasn't here to negotiate feelings or soothe bruised egos. I was here to reclaim my life. By midweek, the drama reached a new peak. Madison arrived at Charles' workplace unannounced, her friends in tow, claiming urgent need for discussion. Security called me down to the lobby, a surreal moment of public confrontation. "Julia, this isn't fair," Madison said, her eyes brimming with tears. "I didn't mean it. I love you. Please, let's talk." I crossed my arms and studied her. "You meant it, Madison. Every word. You just got caught. This isn't about love. It's about honesty. You used him for convenience while looking for someone better." Her friends jumped in, trying to soften the blows. "Julia, please, consider what you're doing. You're destroying her life." I shook my head slowly. "I'm not destroying her life. I'm ending her reliance on mine. She created this situation, not me. I'm giving her consequences, not punishment." That's when it hit me, the slow reveal of the betrayal's depth. Madison had carefully built her life around exploitation. The Instagram posts, the calculated friendships, the subtle manipulation, everything was a network of control I hadn't seen before. It explained the comments, the behavior at dinner, even the casual dismissal of Charles' stability. She had been strategic, almost surgical, in her deception. Cinematic flashbacks played in my mind. The first birthday gift she never appreciated, the late-night help she requested but never reciprocated, the casual mentions of men with more money. All of it, trivial in isolation, now painted a clear pattern. This wasn't a mistake. This was a choice. By Thursday, Madison escalated further, filing threats of legal action. She claimed promissory estoppel and unjust enrichment, alleging I had promised financial support that she had relied on to her detriment. I laughed quietly, imagining the courtroom drama she envisioned. Her evidence? Zero. My cousin, a lawyer, called it the most entitled piece of fiction I've ever read. Her friends continued to advocate for her online. "Julia, don't be cruel. You owe her." I paused at my phone, reading the messages, then I typed one calm reply. "Interesting. Using me for financial support while seeking someone wealthier is not a promise. I have documentation, witnesses, and text evidence proving the arrangement ended the moment the betrayal became clear. You can sue if you like. I call it accountability." The response was immediate. Silence. For the first time, the weight of her own words began to fall on Madison. Then came the final push. She showed up at my new apartment late at night, dressed carefully, hair styled, makeup flawless. She carried a bottle of my favorite whiskey, her smile desperate, seductive. "Julia," she said softly, leaning in, "please, 5 minutes. We can start over. I'll get my own place. We can rebuild." I studied her. The mask was slipping. Beneath the polished exterior was the same manipulation I had seen since that dinner 2 weeks ago. "Madison," I said evenly, "there is no rebuilding. I can't be a placeholder, a wallet, or a safety net. You made your choices. I made mine." Her eyes flickered, tearful now, frustration and desperation mingling. She tried again, softer, pleading. "I didn't mean it. I love you. We can fix this." I shook my head slowly. "You meant it. You planned it. You knew what you were doing. The apartment, the utilities, the bills, everything was part of your convenience. I ended that arrangement. That is not cruelty. That is justice." Her final form emerged, rage masked by tears. She hurled the whiskey bottle at my door. It didn't break. The act, theatrical and destructive, left me with only clarity. The past 2 years had been a lie. I let her leave. I didn't call after her. I didn't follow. For the first time, my boundaries were unshakable. Madison could scream, manipulate, and threaten. She could use social media, friends, or her parents. None of it would reach me. Sitting on my couch afterward, I reflected. The chaos outside, the posts, the threats, the confrontations, had no power over the woman I had become. Betrayal had revealed itself, and I had survived it. I was stronger, clearer, and finally, independent. I didn't feel guilt or even anger anymore. I felt liberated. The weekend arrived with the tension still simmering in the background. Madison had tried everything: social media campaigns, parental pressure, public confrontations, even legal threats. But now, the final reckoning loomed. She showed up again, this time at my new apartment, dressed carefully, makeup perfect, holding the air of someone who believed charm could rewrite reality. She knocked on my door, waiting for me to answer. I did. Calm, unflinching. "Julia, please, 5 minutes," she said, eyes glistening. "I'll move out. I'll get my own place. We can start over." I stepped aside, letting her in for the briefest of moments, more for composure than conversation. "Madison," I said evenly, "there is no starting over. There's no rebuilding. You used me while planning my replacement. That is not a mistake. It's a choice, and choices have consequences." She leaned forward, desperation dripping from her voice. "I didn't mean it. I love you. We can fix this. I can prove it." I studied her, letting her words hang in the air like smoke. Every manipulation, every lie she'd told was visible now. "You meant it," I said softly, almost pitying. "You meant it while planning a life where I was temporary. That's the truth. I ended that arrangement. That is not cruelty. That is reality." Her face twisted. Rage, disbelief, sorrow, all colliding. She picked up the whiskey bottle I had left on the counter and hurled it at my door. It didn't break. I didn't flinch. She stomped off, leaving a trail of fury and failure behind. By Monday, the legal threats dissolved. Her lawyer realized there was no case. Julia had evidence, witnesses, and legal precedent on her side. Her social media campaign faded as friends began distancing themselves, embarrassed by the spectacle. Patricia and Robert continued to fume, but even they recognized that the apartment and bills were now their daughter's responsibility. Charles called once more, tentative, almost pleading. "Julia, can we talk?" I took a deep breath. "There's nothing left to talk about. I trusted you, loved you, and shared my life with you. You turned that into a transaction. I'm not an ATM. I'm not a placeholder. You've been given the consequences you created. That's all you need to know." The phone went silent. Then the line clicked. Freedom. I spent that evening alone in my apartment, finally letting the weight of 2 years lift. Each object, each piece of furniture, each book I had taken back felt like reclaiming not just space, but identity. The betrayal had stung, yes, but it had clarified something far more important. I deserved honesty, respect, and reciprocity. A few days later, news reached me that Madison had moved back to her parents' basement. She tried one last stunt, a moving party turned social media event, framing herself as a survivor of financial abuse. Only a handful of people showed up. Eric, my friend, texted me the play-by-play, amusement threaded through every message. Her friends had begun pulling away. Ashley even apologized privately, admitting she had encouraged Madison's gold digger phase. I didn't respond. I didn't need closure from her. My closure came from knowing the truth had finally caught up with Madison. Life slowly returned to normal. I set up my apartment exactly as I wanted, enjoying the quiet mornings, uninterrupted routines, and simple pleasures. No more tiptoeing around deceit. No more wondering if affection was real or transactional. The clarity was liberating. Weeks later, I reflected on everything: the betrayal, the manipulation, the confrontations. Lessons had been harsh, but they were clear. Boundaries matter. Recognizing deception early can save years of emotional labor. Trust must be mutual, and self-respect is non-negotiable. Even now, when I walk through the city streets, I feel a sense of resilience that didn't exist before. The storm of betrayal, confrontation, and social pressure has passed. What remains is strength, clarity, and the freedom to live fully on my own terms. I smile quietly. thinking back on the restaurant, the hallway, the words that changed everything. Placeholder. That word had been a dagger, but the choice to stand firm, to reclaim my life, transformed the pain into power. Madison's attempts to manipulate, gaslight, or shame me failed, not because I was stronger than her, but because I had finally recognized my own worth. Her social media posts, her dramatic appearances, her threats, they were noise. I had the evidence, the clarity, and the moral ground. That was enough. Life had shifted. The betrayal had ended, the manipulation had dissolved, and I had emerged intact, empowered, and wiser. I would never be a placeholder again. And for the first time in years, I felt fully, completely, and unapologetically free. Weeks had passed since the storm had ended. Madison had retreated to her parents' basement, quietly nursing bruised pride and the embarrassment of public exposure. Social media had cooled, friends had distanced themselves, and the legal threats had vanished. The world had returned to its rhythm, but I remained changed. I spent mornings drinking coffee by the window, watching the city wake without the weight of someone else's deception on my shoulders. The apartment was quiet, filled with only what I had chosen to keep. No lingering resentment, no unnecessary drama, just peace. I reflected on the path that led here. 2 years of my life had been spent in a relationship where affection and convenience were tangled and trust had been tested daily. That single word, placeholder, had cut deep, but it was also the catalyst I needed to reclaim my life. Betrayal had a way of sharpening perception, and I had learned to see clearly, to trust my instincts, and to enforce boundaries I should have recognized long ago. Even Charles, though now an afterthought, had experienced his own awakening. Responsibility, suddenly all his, forced him to confront reality. I had not sought revenge, only justice, yet the consequences were unmistakable. Madison's social persona had shifted too. Gone were the grandiose claims of financial abuse. The GoFundMe had vanished, replaced by silence. Her friends, once loyal accomplices, had quietly distanced themselves. Ashley reached out an apology, admitting she had encouraged Madison's manipulative behavior. I didn't respond. I had no need for their validation or reconciliation. The freedom I felt wasn't just financial, it was moral, emotional, and spiritual. I had been used, yes, but I was no longer a passive participant. I had acted with clarity, with reason, and with boundaries intact. I had reclaimed not just my space, but my dignity, my agency, my life. Sitting alone one evening, I thought back to the small details, the hallway in the restaurant where I first overheard the truth, the exact cash I left for my portion of the meal, the subtle smiles and lies I endured for months. Each memory was a thread, now woven into a tapestry of lessons learned, resilience forged, and self-respect reclaimed. I realized that the past, no matter how painful, had shaped me into someone stronger, someone capable of discerning truth from deception. I could now trust my own judgment, set boundaries, and insist on reciprocity in relationships. Those 2 years, which once felt wasted, had instead become the crucible that refined my sense of self. And yet there was room for forgiveness, not for her, but for me. Forgiveness for staying too long, for trusting too easily, for allowing my heart to be exploited. Forgiveness for recognizing my own humanity in the midst of betrayal. I smiled softly, imagining the future. Independent, clear-eyed, and emotionally resilient, I could now pursue relationships built on mutual respect, honesty, and love, never convenience. My home, my life, my choices, untouched by manipulation, fully mine. In the quiet of that evening, I raised a glass, not to the chaos, not to the betrayal, but to myself, to survival, to clarity, to freedom. The lessons were hard-earned, the wounds slow to heal, but I had emerged whole, and for the first time in years, I could say, without hesitation, I am enough, I am free, and I will never be a placeholder again.